Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mosaic Podcast. Somehow they're happening faster and more furiously than ever before. People are finding out about us. It's so great because people are enjoying it. The people that I have on are saying stuff like, I've never been on a podcast where they ask these types of questions or did these types of things. And I don't mean to say that to sort of scare my next guest, because Michael and I don't know each other really that much. We had one conversation. And in that conversation, you know me, I misbehaved a little bit and turned the tables over and, hopefully helped him put back onto his table whatever it was he wanted to keep, and hopefully discarded from his table what he didn't want to keep. So it's an honor to have him back here now, because what I love to do in this podcast is introduce people that I love to people that I love. And so in that short time that I was with Michael, I have a man crush on him. I love him, and he's a brother. And I want to invite you to meet somebody that I just met that I'm going to discover along with you on this podcast. Let me give you a little history about him so that you're not just walking in blind based on this little love feast that I have for him. Michael helps men create a life that is deeply connected to powerful core values and to a well-defined purpose. His driving principles are ones of meaning and contribution, believing that a man embodies masculinity when he leads his family and community towards positive change and self-empowerment, with courage and deep conviction with self. He's been guiding men for 15 years to live with an attitude of legacy and the intention to leave humanity better, by engaging them in purpose and vision that was bigger than who they thought they were when they first met him. He's the author of the best-selling book, Forging Excalibur Rediscover Your Masculinity, and his website is www.michaellauria.coaching.com. Don't worry about spelling it. Don't worry about catching it. It's all in the show notes. We'll get that for you here. Without further ado, Brother Michael, I want to introduce you to the Mosaic Podcast, and I want to say what a joy it is to have you on the show. How are you today?
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate this. That was a wonderful introduction. And I've got to say, when we first met the other day, I'm all about the archetypes, right? So I do a lot of my work is around the archetypes, Carl Jung's archetypes. And I've got to say, after our conversation, I think you're a good, beautiful fusion of the jester and the wizard archetype.
Okay. I like that. The jester over here, I think, is called the fool, which if he is, that resonates more than the jester, but that's probably good.
I was being polite.
I gotcha. Okay. Well, I love that old Beatles song. Nobody wants to know him. They say that he's a fool. They don't like him, the fool on the hill. And he's talking about, the Maharishi. So I take that with, I love that. Hey, so let's jump in. Tell me what your parents did.
What my parents did for work or just in life?
Like, what I want to try and do is figure out the environment. I want to introduce you through the environment you've come from. What did they do at his work?
Yeah,
what
cool.
did they do? How did they set the table for the life that you live?
So I come from an Italian background, a very traditional Italian background too. And so Dad was an accountant. And he worked for Telstra here in Australia, which is the biggest telecommunications firm in Australia. And he was an accountant for Telstra. And my mum was she looked after my brother and I for many, many years. And she looked after our life. So she managed our life, and she organised Dad, and she organised the family. She was really the organiser and the manager of our lives and our family. And then when I was around about 12 or so, and my brother was 8, she started working for a doctor as a receptionist. And she moved on to then work for a homeopath and an osteopath. And then she really loved that health and helping industry, which was perfect for her because she was such a loving, compassionate, connected human being. And so just beautiful. Like, if you ever wanted a hug or a kiss or words of encouragement or just compassion and affection and love, Mum had plenty of it to go around for everybody. especially her two boys and her husband.
Wow.
Um, and Dad, Dad was awesome, like Dad, and still is. And he was very much the doer and the provider and the protector. And he worked a full-time job as an accountant, as I said, with Telstra. And then he also worked part-time for a tax firm doing people's taxes every year, which that income provided enough for them to pay the mortgage off a lot quicker than what people normally did. And so they were really structured. Their roles were very well defined in the relationship. They made a lot of time for us as their sons, and other families as well. So there was a lot of time for all that. And I think they created a really, really good balance between work and all of the doing stuff, and then all of the being as well. So yeah, it was a pretty good upbringing. Coming from an Italian background, very strict and very hard and fast, rigid rules about certain things. But I think what that taught me was that there are things in life where you can be rigid about, and I've come to the awareness that that's, for me, that's around being rigid and immovable around my core values and a purpose in life. But everything else is adaptable.
Fabulous. Who did you want to impress most growing up?
Oh,
Who's
it was always Dad.
always Dad?
It was because I felt not that Dad didn't love us, but there was. I think I just felt that immediate approval and validation from Mum all the time, because she was always a smile, always a hug, always a kiss. It was almost like you never had to really try with Mum. Whereas I think, and reflecting back on it with Dad, I think he was so focused on providing for the family and working hard and paying the mortgage and providing a secure financial environment for us, because he was also an accountant. So he was very much about the numbers and the results. And I think he was so focused on that was his way of contributing to the family.
Yeah.
And so perhaps after he finished his full-time job and his part-time job every week, and then he did the garden, he took care of our garden as well. We had a big backyard and a pool and a big front yard, and it was pristine and immaculate all the time. So I think once all of that was taken care of, I would imagine that he was exhausted.
Yes, I bet. Did he bring you in? Did he have you garden with him, or was it sort of his solace to just do that on his own?
I think there was a good mix of that. There was certain times when I know that he would just be out there doing his thing, and I think that was his, maybe not escape, but it was his form of relaxation, because he did tell me later in life that gardening is very therapeutic for him. And
Yeah.
so I think that away from being a husband and a father and a provider, I think that was his, maybe you might want to call it an escape for him, to get out in the garden and just do things and be with himself and feel like he's accomplished a task and he's been of service to his family. But then there were other times, depends on the job, right? When there was a really unpleasant job in the garden to do, he'd enlist my brother and I to go and do it. So we had this deciduous, I think it was like a maple tree out the front yard. And underneath the maple tree, there were all these rocks, all these little pebbles and stones. And so at a certain time of year, obviously autumn, all the leaves would fall. So he'd get my brother Paul and I out in the front yard around this tree, picking up all the leaves. It was the most, and then we'd end up with 50 cents as pocket money.
Right.
That was 35 years ago, right? So
Right.
a long time ago.
But not that long ago. 50 cents still wasn't that much 35 years ago.
But still, you could buy a bag of lollies
Right.
for 50 cents back then. So,
Right.
So that was okay. But yeah, so we do things like that.
So it's interesting because, and I normally don't go right into work, but I know obviously your work is set up around men. And so, and your father was, if you think about archetypes, which you talked about, the archetype of the man is that he works and he provides the income to keep the family strong, and he takes care of the family, and he does that. And he's there and he's available, but he's in the same way that he was available. I'm asking you, I'm lobbing this over to you because you didn't say he wasn't available. But if a man's working a full-time job, a part-time job, and has a robust garden in the back and a pool that needs to be cleaned, the amount of time is like, and mom is just available for you,
Mm,
and you don't need to worry about getting her approval and her love because you know you have it, but you sort of want to get your dad's love and approval because he's not there that much. I'm just reframing. If I'm saying anything wrong,
mm,
correct me.
mm.
Walk that now into the work that you do with men, because that's such a classic stereotype of how
Yeah.
we all grew up. What is the modern day man stereotype that you paint for people? Is it much different?
So it's, I think the result is similar. In fact, I think the result is worse now than what it was back then, because there's so many more distractions and there's so much more societal expectations on men these days than what they were back then. Roles were more clearly defined.
Yeah.
50 years ago, even 30 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago, roles were very clearly defined in relationships and within the family. And the role was, and I'm generalizing here because this wasn't
Totally.
always the case and in every family, but generally speaking, the man would go out and he would earn the income, and the woman would stay home, raise the children, do the housework, make sure there was food in the fridge, dinner on the table, all that stuff, right? They're both very important roles because you have to have, and I think that was when relationships worked very well, when there were well-defined roles between people, whether it was the woman out there working or the man. I don't think it matters, but as long as there's well-defined roles. And so when we fast forward now a number of decades and we see that these roles are quite, they're blurred. So everyone seems to do everything. And there's almost this competitive edge in relationships now where who's earning the most money and who's contributing the most to the household and who's doing the shopping and who's doing, the roles aren't so well defined. And so that opens the door to misunderstandings and lack of communication, et cetera, which leads to relationship breakdown eventually if two people aren't conscious within that. So the other part of this is that men now still work to provide and protect like they did decades ago. But the difference now that I'm seeing in society is that we have this, what I call, and I talk about this in my book, which is our very toxic, success-driven society where men are encouraged and even pushed sometimes, and they feel this obligation to somehow be successful in the modern sense of the word. And the modern sense of the word is around the acquisition of material possessions and monetary wealth and societal status. And there's almost this inbuilt and innate quest for success that men feel that they need to go on. And as a result, what happens is they become so all consumed by this really very much undefined version of success, because most men can't define what success means to them. They just know it means a lot of money, a big house, a nice car, and a high-paying job. That's what they can't really define it aside from that.
So the
And
men
so I
that
think,
you're referring to don't say that emotional success or family success is what's important to them. That comes secondary or tertiary to their first belief,
so
which is taking care of the family financially and physically is the most important.
well, there's a paradox within that, because that's why they do this. That's what they say. That's why they want to strive for this level of success, because they want to provide for their families. But they believe a lot of, and I was this too many years ago. So they believe that by doing what they do and being all consumed by work, career, and business, and that's about providing, which in turn protects the family as well. That's being a good father and a good partner.
Yeah.
But then when you truly get to the core of it, and you start, and I surveyed a lot of men for my book, thousands of men for my book, and I asked them, I said, tell me what you truly value. Is it money? So if you got to that undefined version of success and you had all the money in the world, but then on the quest to become successful, so-called successful, you lose your family as a result, would that feel like a successful life to you? Would that feel like you've done everything that you should be doing? And 97.5% of men, of all the 3,000 men that I surveyed, said, no, that's not successful. I want to be able to provide for my family, but be deeply connected with them too. And so there's a real disconnect, and there's the paradox, because in that, if they're not working as hard as what they think they should to provide for their family, then they don't feel relevant, they don't feel successful, and then somehow they feel inadequate in that role.
So I'm sitting here trying to hear the voices of the people that are listening. And you're in Australia, and I don't know if Australia is different than America. We're in America. And I can hear women saying, well, hold on, man, what are you talking about? And I can hear them saying, like, we want to help. Like, you don't have to take on the burden of taking care of us all by yourself, nor do we even want you to. We want to be a team that comes together to work together to create all the things that we need. And we want to merge the things together. We want to have
Yeah.
it be that we both go out there and work. We both take care of our family. We both do the things that you can enjoy the kids, and we can enjoy going out and getting a break from the kids, and you can enjoy going out and taking, and
Mm.
we can be a family together, and we're all here for each other, helping each other do this. What in the world is this guy talking about? I'm hearing them say. Okay. And so please, for the voices of those people that may just be the phantoms that I have in my head, but I believe I know my audience pretty well.
Yeah.
What would you say to those people?
So I've heard this a lot.
I
And
bet.
I've also been a relationship coach over the last 10 years as well. So I can answer this from that experience too, and that, whatever level of wisdom I've attained during doing that too. And what I find is that people generally get into relationships unconsciously. There's an attraction, and I'm going to answer your question. There's an attraction, and then they start to see, because there's an attraction and there's desire there initially, usually sexual desire. They see what they wish to see, and we always find what we're looking for, right? And so that people see what they want to see, they don't see the other stuff. And so we get into relationships with people unconsciously, or in a very unaware state. And then what we fail to do at the beginning of those conversations, at that beginning point of a relationship, is have really good quality conversations with each other around, what do you value, what do I value, how do we manage this life that we're going to do together, and how does that look, and what's your role and what's my role, and how do we want to create space for each other to live with a sense of purpose, but also contribute to each other, and really create this union and this finely oiled machine, or this well-oiled machine, that can do life really well, and even adapt that to when we have children, etc., etc., etc. So people don't do that. And because men have this real innate, inherent need to serve and provide, that's just built into our DNA. Then what happens is that without those good quality conversations, men feel like they need to do this. This is a requirement for them. And so they do a lot of this stuff unconsciously. And that's what, when I talk about that, providing at such a high level, they do this unconsciously. And when there's not good quality conversations within relationships, this is where there's a disconnect between the man feeling like he has to provide and protect, and the woman thinking, well, you're always at work. I don't get to see you. We don't get to see you. And yeah, the money's great, but you're not around. And by the time you come home at night, there's no intimacy because you're tired, and I feel disconnected, and I actually want that connection. And so I think that over years and years and years of that, we lose the ability or the will or motivation to even communicate that effectively, because by then each person has built up this level of resentment that, the man, I'm out there working all the time, she doesn't appreciate me. I'm providing for the family, she doesn't appreciate me, she wants more. And she's saying, well, he's never here, and he doesn't connect, and he's disconnected, and he's disengaged, and I don't know him anymore. And so by then, unless you're consciously aware of what's happened, good quality conversation doesn't happen.
So I can't tell if it's a battle that I'm having inside myself. And I say this with all the love of my heart. Okay. So it's not to fry you or put you on a cross or to do any of that, because
No, go
I,
for it.
I really believe that there's something so valuable to a man being a man and a woman being a woman.
Absolutely.
And I believe that when we stand in our place And it doesn't matter who's working more hours or who's bringing in more money, but there's such a beautiful energy. When I'm with my wife, she is such a feminine woman.
Mm.
I feel she makes me feel like a man, because I just love how feminine she is, and she's strong. Don't get me wrong. She runs the household. She takes care. I mean, they say behind every man is a strong woman. Well, God,
Yeah.
it's not behind anymore. It's like it's like neck and neck. But what also allows her to be that, because she came from a relationship where it was an abusive relationship, where she had to be more masculine also. And
Mm.
when she met me, I'm not like a, chopping wood, carrying water sort of guy, even though I love the zenness of that. I'm not that kind of man, but I definitely hold the masculine presence. I
Yeah.
definitely hold the presence of being someone who's strong in myself, who's confident in myself, who knows my place, who says what I believe. And what happened within a very short period of time, the desire for her to be a man melted, because when a woman is with a man, she can be a woman, and when a
Mm.
man's with a woman, he can be a man. And so I agree with you that there's some blurred stuff there, but somehow the way it's coming across, I feel it's almost like 30 years ago, at least in America. I don't know what maybe in Australia it's different. It feels like I I believe we're in a time where all of it is evolving, but it doesn't mean the role of a man being a man is not important, and a woman being a woman is not important. But the definition of what that is, my dad worked his tail to the bone,
Mm.
and my mom was home making cookies for us. And even when she did finally go out to work against my dad cried when my mom went out to work. But we just needed the extra income. He just said, I can't believe this is happening. And I feel like less of a man. But she wanted to bring in money to help him. And he
Mm.
cried at the dinner table. It hurt him that much.
Yeah. Right.
But
Different,
this
a
was
different, very different era as
very
well.
different era.
Yeah.
But she came home so that there could be milk and cookies on the table when we came home
Mm.
from school. She was there when we were, and so it was a whole different era. But this era, I guess what I want to ask you is, in the courses that you do and the training that you do and the workshops that you give and the retreats that you have, what role of man do you create? Do you create the 30-year-old model of a man? Because we talked about this when we were talking, and
Yeah.
I razzled you on your imagery, right, and on forging Excalibur and all of that, because it's a link to a time when men were knights,
Yeah.
and we're now. And so, do you believe the model is the same as it was then, is the same as it is now, is the same as it will be, that a man's role is essentially the same no matter what era we're in, what decade we're in? And if it is, that's beautiful. I would love to know more about that.
I think roles can shift and change and ebb and flow. I don't have an issue with any of that. And no, I'm not trying to create men from 30 or 40 or 50 years ago, or even relationships from back then either, because I do think that relationships in society back then was very disempowering for women. Um, so that's definitely, so I'll just clear that up for a second. That's not the intention, and that's not the objective.
Good.
The objective is, and then when we start to talk about knights and forging Excalibur, yes, it harks back to an age where that we would like to perhaps, maybe in some regards, forget, or maybe not even want to acknowledge, because it was also an age of violence and barbarism too. But having said that, it's not about that either. So we're not creating alpha males here that go out with their Excalibur and at the drop of a hat they'll plunge their sword into somebody's heart. Okay,
Right.
so there's none of that either. Excalibur is a symbol of responsibility and inner power. Okay, because when you reflect on the tale of Excalibur and the fable of Excalibur and how King Arthur came into possession of Excalibur, it was the wizard Merlin. So King Arthur had to protect England, okay? And so the wizard Merlin, who was his advisor, said to him, okay, well, you need a sword, an indestructible sword. So he went off and he engaged the elves of Avalon. This is the mythology, right?
Right.
He engaged the elves of Avalon to forge this sword, Excalibur. And so then Excalibur was given to King Arthur by the Lady of the Lake. And then King Arthur went off and he used Excalibur to defend England. And then he returned Excalibur back to the Lady of the Lake. So there's a beautiful fusion there of the masculine and feminine. So a sort of power and responsibility was given to a leader of men by a feminine figure, which is the Lady of the Lake. He went off and did what he needed to do with it, led his people, and then returned that sort of power and responsibility to the Lady of the Lake, that feminine again. So there's a beautiful fusion of the masculine and feminine in that fable. And
so
the journey in that...
Do me a favor. Finish up the story, but I that's not where I want to be. Because those, as beautiful as that is, and as much as that tells about what you do, it's so impersonal right now to what we're talking about. Like, I want to know, I want to bring this into people right here, right now.
I'm getting to that.
Okay, please, let's speed it. Let's go a little.
We have to have background, right? We've got to have context before we get, because it's important to understand a little bit about the mythology, and then we can go into the rest of it. So then when we go into, men becoming knights, in order for men to become knights back in the day, they had to embody certain attributes, traits, and virtues in order to do that. And one of the highest virtues that they embodied and embraced and had to demonstrate before they became a knight was one of service and contribution to people, their community, the kingdom, women and children. There was an attitude of service and contribution there. And compassion as well. It wasn't all about training with a sword and going out to battle. That was very rare, actually. Most of the time, these knights were of service to the kingdom and the people of the kingdom. And so when we start to understand some of those virtues and attributes and traits that these men had to embody on their journey, their hero's journey to becoming knights, that's what we're creating here. We're creating men who embody all of these virtues, such as compassion and responsibility, and self-actualization, becoming the best version of themselves possible on their journey towards becoming knights. And that's why I do what I do, because there's a lot of men out there who don't embody these virtues and attributes. And the work that I do, we really connect deeply with what the journey these men had to go on to become knights and what was required of them in terms of service, purpose, and contribution. And so that's the energy behind that. And that's the kind of men that we're creating, men who are deeply connected with themselves, men who are deeply connected with an attitude of service and contribution, but also have an inner strength to get out there and protect and provide when needed as well, but also know when to step back into compassion and service.
In the green room, before we started, I said to you, what do I say to ladies? Because my audience is partly ladies. And you said we're all humans and all the principles apply. I don't hear that in the language you're speaking now. And so I really want to just bring it. I want to fast run this 400 years. I don't want to be in the 1600s right now. Which is not where you want to go. You're drawing your inspiration from what people did in that period of time to create men in this period of time.
Absolutely.
What about humanity in general? What about why do we need to go back 400 years to understand a life of service, to understand a life of compassion? I would, if I were debating you now, which I don't want to do, I would say there's so many more examples of that current and modern day. Why do we need to go back to times when there were nights when men cheated on their women, when men were out frolicking in the fields, is that really, like, what I'm wanting to know is, when a man comes to you, what is he looking for to come to take your course?
He's looking for purpose. and meaning in life. And of course, there's nothing within my program or my attitude of helping men that has anything to do with normalizing or making it okay for them to go out and frolic in the fields with other women.
Right, right.
You know, there's
So the example. Anyway, let me ask you something else, because I don't want to change your whole philosophy. I just want to.
well, you can't,
No,
and you won't. So
no, no.
because I'm very.
Nor do I want to.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing, Daniel. Here's the thing. We can look at this as a violent, barbaric generation of men, or number of generations of men, who would cheat on their women and frolic in the fields, etc., etc. We can look at that if we want to, or we can take the parts from that generation or that way of being that are missing from society that are needed now. And when we see things out there in society, such as, you know, a real toxic fourth and fifth wave of feminism coming through, plus our society has normalized this indoctrination of boys and men around toxic masculinity. And so there's this indoctrination in our society where masculinity is toxic. Any real expression of masculinity is toxic. Then we have a generation coming through of boys and men who have no idea how to embody these traits and virtues. And they step back into this real submissive energy that is in no way connected with what we need in society for leaders and people who can contribute and be of service to society and humanity.
And let me switch focus, because
because we can look at any aspect of history. It doesn't matter how far back we go. There's always a positive aspect to it or a negative one which serves and one which doesn't serve. All I'm doing is taking a very recognizable symbol from history and saying, here's the awesome parts of that, and here's how we can use some of that symbology and some of the virtues and some of the attributes and traits of these men, and bring that into the modern world and fuse that, have this beautiful fusion of what worked back then, what served back then, and start to bring that into our modern world to create a society that is a lot more embodied and integrated, and create men who are more empowered and confident and self-assured with purpose, who can lead and who can their families as well, and who can contribute at a high level.
Are you married, Michael? Are you married?
Yes, I am. Yep.
And what's your wife do?
My wife is a coach, and she's also, so she does the traditional role, but she chooses to do that, and she's also got a part-time business. She's a personal trainer, and she's a coach as well for women.
Do you have kids?
We have three. I have three children.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a question that's been bubbling up inside me since I read your bio, since I read your introduction, that I really wanted to ask you about, and I didn't quite know how to fit it in, but maybe I can fit it in within this context.
Sure.
Because part of what's perplexing me, part of what's almost annoying me, to be honest, is this nostalgic reach back. My words, not yours, because you would never say that way. But this reach back to a time when men were men, and yet in every single, like, here's the beautiful thing: when we build a life that's deeply connected to powerful core values, there's nobody in the world that would disagree with that statement.
Mm-hmm.
In my own life personally, I found the biggest problems I've had were when my core values were in opposition to each other. And that core value battle ripped me apart. And what I realized in speaking with you right now, that's really what's happened to me. Like, I understand the core values of what you're trying to bring to people, which is that when the beauty of the sovereignty of a man who decided to become a knight, and especially in the King Arthur round tables. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
but there are core values that they held that I don't agree with also. And when those core values are in opposition with each other, what do we really do? I'll make it really personal because I hope this conversation will get more personal, because right now I feel like we're hiding a lot behind work that we do and things that we say, and it's not really real. I want to make
I
it real.
think I think also core values have to be clearly defined as well. So core values are not things that are important or a way of behavior. They are immutable and immovable values that we have, not
Okay.
just things that are important to us that don't always in conflict with our values. Then I think what's in conflict is a belief or a way of being, or perhaps an attitude or an opinion that might be in conflict with core values. And that's
So
usually what happens.
it's very brave of you to answer the question before it's even asked, but that isn't my question. Okay. And so sit with me a little bit. I know I'm slow and boring, but sit with me a moment. I have a core value of wanting to be loved. I also have a core value of integrity. Would you admit that both of those in your makeup are core values?
I would I would say that they are things that are important to me, but they're not core values, because core values are immutable and immovable, which means that no person, circumstance, or situation can possibly um, cloud or inhibit or question our core values in any way, shape, or form.
Do you have
And
a
so, with
desire? Do you have a desire? Do you have a core? Which one of those do you think is not immutable?
I think both of them are not immutable,
Well,
because integrity, we can think that we always act with integrity and think with integrity, but the example that I use a fair bit with people is, and most people act like this. Maybe you wouldn't, but most people do. So let's just put it out there and say we're working in a job, and we do our job at our highest capacity because we have a value of integrity. And so what starts to happen is our wage or our pay starts to become late, and we have to question the money that's coming into our bank account, and when is it coming, and when am I going to be paid? And there's a lot of uncertainty around that. And then our boss we feel devalued in our position because our boss says or does something that makes us feel devalued within our position. And so we're not being paid on time, and sometimes we don't get paid at all. We don't feel valued in our role. Somebody else might get promoted even though we've done this massive job and we've done really well over a period of time. And so I wonder if we still turn up to our desk on time every day. I wonder then after that if we still give 150% like we used to. I wonder then if we still strive to be of service to the company, or we're a little bit more self-serving because we feel like we're not being valued and honored at a high level. And so most people that I've talked about with this, and as I said, you might be different, but most people that I've talked about this have said, yes, there's definitely a potential that I might not give as much as what I did previously. There's definitely a potential that I might not want to be of service and contribution to that company as I was before. And so then I challenge people and say, well, is that living with integrity? Because living with integrity and having that as a core value means that it doesn't matter what your boss does or when your pay turns up in your account, you still do everything at the level at which you did when things were perfect, or when you felt valued, and when money was turning up in your account.
so in a storybook world, I agree with you, but we don't live in storybook worlds. We live in a
But if we're
world.
going to say that
So let me just. I don't mean to put you on defensive. I'm trying. I
no, I'm
want you.
not.
Okay.
I'm not on the defensive. I'm used to kind of explaining this because
Time. You might be used to explaining it, but you're not used to explaining it to me. And the explanation you're giving doesn't soothe me and doesn't give me what I want. So I'm asking you for clarity. So I just need you to remain quiet for a couple minutes. I never do this on a podcast, but this is annoying to me. And I want to get to the place where it's annoying, because I love that you're bringing out this annoying quality in me. because my there's a you are saying exactly what I am saying, but you're in my story, you are sugarcoating it by saying the value of integrity is stronger than the value of being respected. What I'm saying is, when you have a value where you want to be respected for the job you do and the work you do, and you have a ton of integrity, but when you no longer feel valued in the job that you do because you're not getting paid, you're not getting respected, you're not getting that core value, which I believe is a core value of wanting to respect and to be respectful, and that core value of integrity are come in compact with each other. They're like knights fighting on a battlefield with each other. And no matter who wins, everybody loses, and no matter who loses, everybody wins. It's a very complicated, it's a very tough situation. You can't say, in my mind, you can't just say, well, if you really had integrity, you wouldn't care about being respected or not, because that's bullshit in my mind. Because I have a core
Sorry, you cut
value.
out. You cut out. You cut out for a second. I wouldn't say that.
I don't think you can sugarcoat over it by saying that if you have integrity, you wouldn't worry about being respected because you're a man of integrity. You show up and you show up and you show up. But there's a certain, I'll tell you where it's very personal, and I just need you to give me 2 minutes on this. Growing up, I was a man who said I believed affairs were really wrong. I couldn't understand how anybody could have an affair. And I was an advocate of affair. I would talk about them. I would counsel my friends about them who were doing it. I would say, I just don't understand you at all. And guess what happened? A woman passed me by and walked through me. Her DNA remained in me, and my DNA remained in her, and I was married. And as much as I had this feeling of my integrity says I should never have an affair, I had a super strong need to feel loved and wanted in a way that my wife loved me and wanted me, but there was something about what happened in this relationship that happened. And it tore me apart because I had two core values. If I would have said, hey, I just have integrity and walked away from her, I would have felt lost. If I went into her and lost my integrity, which I did, I felt lost. I felt like I had a hole in my soul because I had lost the only thing that I defined myself by as a man of integrity. Those are real battles. Those are the battles where we have to be knights. Those are the battles where we have to have tools. Those are the battles where we have to stand up and fight those battles and understand what we lose and what we win, no matter which decision we make. You can say, gosh, neither one of those are core values, and skate around it. But I don't believe the men that I know, even in the example you gave of being disrespected by not getting paid on time, of being disrespected by being looked over for something that they feel like they were competent to do, of being disrespected by not having the conversations that go to explain that to them. I believe three things people want. They want to be loved and accepted. They want to be listened to and heard. They want to be acknowledged and validated. That's about as close to the core values to me that I would give for human beings. When something goes against those, when integrity of I don't know, I would look at you if you were coaching me at this point and say, like, I know that you want to be respected, and I know you want to be loved. I know you want to be loved, and I know you want your boss to take care of you and do that. But a man of integrity still shows up. I would say I would walk away from you, honestly, because I don't think you're looking at what the battle on the battlefield is. So tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me not why I'm wrong. Show me another perspective of that I can walk away here and feel what it is that at the heart of what you do.
Because it's how you manage yourself in that situation that determines whether you do so with integrity or not. So some people could sit at their desk and become resentful, turn up late, be resentful, not do the job that they did before. But Acting with integrity is saying this doesn't align with me anymore, and then taking some responsibility around that and saying, well, how do I continue to stay within integrity? Because integrity is my core value. So what does integrity tell me that I should be doing in this particular situation? And that is, you get up off your desk and you walk into your boss's office and you say, hey, I don't feel valued anymore. And this is why, A, B, and C. This is why I don't feel valued anymore. And I really want to feel valued. And I'm approaching you like this because one of my values, core or not, is integrity. And I don't want to sit at my desk and do a job less than the quality at which I used to when I was feeling valued. So I'm coming here to give you an opportunity to explain to me what's happened, how we've gotten to this point, and how we can fix it, so that I can feel like I can be of service and contribution to the company and feel purposeful in my position like I used to.
So
that's integrity.
I love that. So that's having integrity win the war over the value of being respected. Paint that same picture for me when the value of being respected wins the war over integrity.
When the value of being respected wins the war over integrity. Explain
In
what
other
you mean
words,
by
when I told you I have two core values in opposition in your story. One is integrity and one is being respected. You took the winner. You gave the crown to integrity. I want you to now give the crown to being respected. And
so
how does that show up?
Yeah, cool. So in the same way, in my opinion, so if we wish to be respected, if we have felt respected previously in that example that we're using, if we have felt respected previously and we don't now, then it's the same conclusion. It's the same way of being. It's the same action, the same behavior. And that is, well, one of my values is being respected. That's really important to me. And I don't feel that right now. So I'd like to find out how I can feel that again. And so that still is walking into the boss's office, having a conversation with integrity, with a sense of responsibility, who's saying, this is how I feel, and how can we resolve this between us?
Okay, I'm hearing what you're saying. Does it sound a little devoid of emotion? Does it sound a little intellectual to you?
No.
Okay.
No, I think this is about a way of being. Like, if we truly want to say integrity is our value, is a core value, and if we truly want to say that being respected is a core value, then we will take responsibility for that, and we will behave and act in a way that honors those values. And so we might walk into the boss's office.
How about let's change the example to my example, because in your example, I love what you're saying, and I want to say, I'm fighting you, I'm doing it, but I actually really like what you're saying. So I want to acknowledge that and say thank you. I want to see if you can give counsel to me to something that's plagued me for a long time, which is one of my core values was loving and being loved, really being loved deeply. And one of my core values was integrity. And for me, when I felt that love that I had never felt before, when I had literally felt a woman walk through me and her DNA was inside me, the right thing to do would have been to go to my wife and say, baby, I'm not feeling this anymore. Something happened to me. And that would have honored my integrity, but my wife would have gone apeshit. And I needed the space to understand what was actually happening. And when my core value of integrity met my core value of passion, desire, lust, love, all of those things melted into a beautiful, delectable treat, my integrity had no chance. And so choosing that, how do I find my integrity again?
So in that moment, there was a choice, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it really comes down to the choices that we make in a moment. And and I understand where you're coming from, that there was two values there that were in conflict with each other in the same moment. And
Yeah, and
so,
let me jump in a minute. There was a choice, and I tried desperately to make the right choice by cutting it off for a long time, for months. But there,
so when you did,
it was an intellectual choice.
so when you made that intellectual choice, did you then, over those few months, did you then approach your wife at the time and say, "Hey, this is how I'm feeling"?
Tried to,
How
tried.
did you try to? Did
Um,
you have a conversation?
she picked up on it. She
They,
knew there was
and
energy.
women do, yeah.
She knew there was energy between us, and we spoke about it. And every part of the person that I was with integrity, when I wore the hat of integrity, there was no way in the world I was going to have an affair.
Mm,
It doesn't fit into the box of the guy who
yeah.
has integrity. And I put on that hat. I put it on as
Mm.
often as I could. It's how I defined myself. But when that hat of integrity met the feeling that I felt, I suddenly had the hat of that feeling on. And it was almost as if like my face started to, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Elephant Man, but
Yes, I have, yeah.
his face became, decayed, like it started to peel. My face started to peel because I hated what I saw in myself, because I was living, these aren't rational decisions. I mean, what I'm said to you as an intellectual, it feels so easy to sit back and say when it's third person, well, this is what couldn't you have just done this? Well, I did do that, but then the hat
Here's
changed.
what I would here's what I would suggest that could have happened within you.
Please.
So you had this experience, and then your integrity came in and said, "No, I can't do that. That's wrong. That's disloyal to my wife." And then what you did was you then suppressed the desire and attraction for this woman and those real primal instincts that we all have. We suppress and we suppress and we suppress, which you did for probably quite a few months. And we know that
Pressure
when
cooker.
we repress, sorry,
It was like a pressure cooker. It was
exactly. So we know when we suppress and we don't express. So what was missing there was a lack of expression, fully embodied expression with your wife. This is my opinion. This is my view on what you've told me. And so there's two ways of doing this. So you still could have, and again, no judgment and no criticism, because none of us know how we would react or behave in that same circumstances. But what we could choose to do in retrospect, we could have chosen that instead of suppression, we could have approached our wife from a place of integrity as well, because we can still honor this. We can still honor everything. We approach from a place of integrity and say, "Hey, this is what's happened. This is how I feel. I do love you, but this is how I've noticed that I'm feeling or observing about this other person. How can we have a good quality discussion around this? Or
and
can we have a good quality discussion
and the
around
answer
this?"
is no. The
Okay,
answer
so if we
the answer
can't,
would have
so
been,
if we can't,
because
so if we can't,
that opens up a can of worms that may not need to be opened if I could have worked through on my own. I mean, it's
do you,
but
so do you think you work? Do you think you worked through that on your own effectively?
no, because
Okay.
that's exactly my point. When
Mm,
you have a battle of core values, or values, whether they're core values or not, who cares if
mm,
core is in there or not? They're two things that I valued a lot. When you
yep.
have a battle of those values, you can't.
Yep.
It's lose lose. No matter what happens, you don't win. And
Yep.
had I sat
And
down
this is
with,
where,
go
yeah,
ahead.
sorry. I thought you were finished. Please
Had I
go.
sat down with my wife, which I tried numerous times wearing that hat, we did talk about it. It's not like we
Mm,
didn't have discussions, but those discussions became, um, people got hurt. My wife got hurt.
mm-hmm.
The woman I was with, the woman that I was contemplating an affair with, got hurt. I got hurt.
Yep.
And it isn't, you can sit back, like part of the beauty of being a knight, and I'm making teasing you a little bit, but I don't want to tease you. part of the beauty, I wish I could have been a knight where I could have closed down my little face mask there, right? And I could have, and I
And
could
just
have had, and I
hidden
could
from
have
the
had,
world.
and I could have had that metal costume on me where I didn't get pierced and I didn't get hurt and no swords could come in me. But the truth of the matter is, every sword came in me, and wherever I
Yep.
turned, I got hurt. And I had conversations both ways. Like, it's so Pollyannish, and you don't know. I mean, this is the first you're hearing of it, so how would you know? And I love what you're trying to say, but I'm going underneath that to real gut raw feeling that you can intellectually talk to it. I did that for so many years, talking about why would you have an affair with somebody? What do you mean you can't control yourself? Why can't you just talk to your woman? Marriage is you signed up for this. You said till death do us part. What in the world could get in the way of that love that you can't talk, you can't have those conversations? And you know what Mike Tyson says? You can say anything you want until you get hit in the face with the first punch.
Yeah, that's right.
Then the fight changes. Then the fight changes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's where our core values get tested.
Yes. And so,
okay, so
when one core value fights another core value, you don't win. And I want to know how you play that, and if you've ever had to play that. Have you ever had two things that you value strongly go against one another and you couldn't talk your way through it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when I was...
What did you do? Tell me.
I shared this in the first episode of my own podcast a few weeks ago. So when I was 30, so I'm 46, nearly 46 now. When I was 31, I think it was when I was about 31, my first wife and I were in such a massive amount of financial adversity. We had a car loan, a personal loan, a credit card, and a mortgage. Everything was overdue. The bank was about to evict us from our home. So we're in a really very difficult situation. One of my core values is, well, I won't say it's a core value, it's a value, it's something that's very important to me, is my family. And another one is obviously integrity as well. And so I had these two conflicts.
And I bet another one is taking care of your family and financially supporting your family.
Well, that's one of my core values, which is contribution. So one of my core values, which is immutable, is contribution. So no matter what I do, and if it doesn't contribute to others in a positive way, then I won't do it. So, so what happened was October, just before Christmas, and it was becoming clear that there were going to be no presents under the Christmas tree for the children, who at that time was 6 and 10. No, they were younger. They were 4 and 8 or something like that. My 2 older children. And I was working in a job at the time, and very long story short, I saw an opportunity to, well, I won't sugarcoat this. I stole some money from the place that I was working.
Wow.
And I immediately, as soon as I stole this money, I felt a very deep feeling of regret and guilt around that. But that conflict, because that was not acting with integrity in any way, shape, or form. But then there was another part of me which was just as powerful, which was service to my family and contribution to my family and providing for my family. And I didn't want my children to wake up on Christmas morning to no presents.
And so in some ways, it was having integrity to the belief that you were the supporter of your kids and that you wanted your kids to have a Christmas that they could celebrate. And you were having integrity to your family by being able to give them, even though you had a lack of integrity to get you to that place. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I would say that I was trying to provide for my family, and I acted without integrity to do so. What I could have done, in retrospect, is simply approached my wife at the time and said, "Hey, we're in this situation. I don't know how to fix this on my own without doing something unsavory. Let's work together to try and do this." And this goes back to what we were talking about before. And this is the overarching concept, the overarching virtue that I teach and that I teach men is about taking 100% ultimate responsibility for everything in life. How we feel, what we think, the thoughts we choose to focus on, the results we get, they're all, if we take responsibility for everything, then we don't act against our core values in any way, no matter, even if they are in conflict with each other. And so in that particular case, in retrospect, what I could have done is approach my wife and said, we're in this situation. How do we fix it? How do we get out of this? How do we work together as a cohesive unit to resolve this? Or do we need to have a conversation with the kids and say, Christmas might be delayed, Santa's busy,
Right.
whatever it might have been, right?
So
But
why didn't you do that?
because I was acting unconsciously. This is where we go back to the shadow and our
So
unconscious aspects of ourselves.
so let me paint another perspective for you, because I hear that. But the other perspective I want to say is you weren't unconscious at all. You just had the love of your kids and the desire to be a good dad for them in front of them, to give them what they expected, because they weren't able to deal with the conversation of Santa's not coming to our house this year.
But I wonder if that's the model that I wished to, as an example for my children of how to behave and how to resolve a difficulty and an adversity.
So let me continue with that. To me, that model might be best put in, which is why I talk so openly about what I did, not because I'm proud of it, not because I think I behaved correctly, but because the model that I want to show to the world is, no matter how strong our beliefs are, when there's another value that comes that we hold as strongly as the one that we think we hold, all hell breaks loose. And there is really no, you can try and get out of it rationally. You can try and sit down with the kids and say, Santa's sick and he isn't coming this year. Well, how come he's coming to everybody else's house, right? Or Santa's delayed, or but all my friends got presents. And you feel the feeling of being so diminished as a man in the eyes of your children, who feels like he has to support. For me, the feeling of being diminished as a man who told my wife I would be there through death do us part, that I would take care of her, that I would be there for her, to say to her that I was having an affair, or I was about to enter into an affair, or there was another woman that came across. When I was in seminary, the Rebbe told me there's a difference between the truth and honesty. And I said, "What the hell are you talking about? Those are similar words. What do you mean? There's a difference between truth and honesty." He said, "Danny, this is. I'll show you very clearly what it is. Honesty is you come home and you say to your wife, 'I thought about you every minute of the day, except for 45 seconds when this woman walked by. She was gorgeous. I couldn't take my eyes off of her.' What do you think your wife hears? Do you think she hears that
45 seconds.
For 33 hours, 59 minutes, and 15 seconds, she was the only thing in your mind? Or does she hear 45 seconds, right?
Yeah, 45 seconds, of course.
Truth is, baby, I thought about you almost all day today because I love you more than anything. And there are things that get in the way of that sometimes, but I want you to know that I love you more than anything in the whole world. Truth.
Is that integrity?
Yes, because it's truthful.
It is?
Yes, because
Okay.
it's true.
Is there omission? Is there
No,
omission in that?
no, because honesty destroys the truth. Truth is what the most valuable quality is. You can agree or
Okay.
disagree. It's food for thought. For those people who are listening to this podcast, and we're going a little late, and I'm sorry for that, I want to tell you, I want to first tell you how happy I am that the guy that you normally see as this peaceful, loving, caring guy got really physically annoyed in this conversation. And I want to tell you how happy I am that Michael had the integrity of being to stay with me and just walk me through it with him, and to show up in the way he showed up. I don't know that we have the answers to these questions. I don't know that an hour is enough time to do it. But my job here isn't to answer your questions. My job is to question your answers. And so in this conversation, forget about what Michael believes or what I believe. Who cares? I mean, if you want, if what Michael's saying resonates with you, for God's sakes, go to michaellauria.coaching.com, sign up for his program, sign up for his coaching, sign up and be with him. But here's what I really want to ask you. Whether they're core values or not core values, whether they're values, whether they're things you believe in, when you are at war with your own beliefs, who wins? Who loses? And even when you win, even if Michael would have said to his kids, we can't, I can't, I can't do it this year. And the kids were crying and they were depressed and they were like, why can't we have presents? And even if I would have gone to my wife and I said, baby, I love you, but this woman just came into my life and I can't, I can't, I don't know what's going on. You feel it. You feel it from far away. You know what's happening. I'm not going to deny it, but I don't know what to do. My integrity says, don't do anything. My heart says, how can you not? What do you do? As a listener, what do you do? Because of time, I'm summarizing here, but I want to close with one. I want to ask you to volley back what I just said so that you close. And then I want to ask you one final question.
I think that was really insightful what you just said. And I'd like to touch on what you said about truth. I think truth is relative, and I think truth is subjective, depending upon our point of view and our perceptions, and the subconscious veil that we have over how we view the world, and ourselves as well. So I think truth is highly subjective and relative. So when we talk about truth, I think that's going to be different from one person to the next.
Wow.
So yeah. So aside from that, I've loved this time that we've spent together. I can honestly say that nobody has ever, and I've been on dozens of podcasts, nobody has ever challenged me at the depth or the level that you have in this. And I thank you for that. And it's definitely helped me to think differently and to reflect more deeply, because the questions that I usually get asked are quite surface. They're surface questions. Whereas we've dug really, really deep today, and you've questioned and you've challenged my beliefs, which is awesome, because that just helps me to more deeply connect with the fact that what I'm doing, I believe, is valuable for men, and I believe it's valuable for society. And we're not creating men who wield Excalibur and plunge it through people's hearts and behead people out in the street, nor are we encouraging men to go out there and be unfaithful and to behave badly. In fact, it's the very opposite of all of that. So
Totally.
I really thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in you, and there's a lot of insightful perspectives, and I love it.
Well, you said it as you started. You said I'm the fool and the wise guy, whatever it is. Well, you know, when we started our conversation.
Yeah, the jester and the wizard.
And the wizard. So I'm gonna sit with that. Let me close with one question that I ask everybody, and I'd be interested to have your perspective, because so many of the things you said, and I want to highlight this to listeners. Like, whether you believe what Michael's saying or what I'm saying, it's not important. What is important is he challenged some of my belief systems in a way that what do you mean truth is relative? But that's his belief system, okay? And so when I look at that, I can't say now that that's what I have to look at what he thinks, because I respect his opinion. What has he challenged in you? What have I challenged in you that'll get you to shake off some of the stuff that you just believe because you were told to believe it, or think you should believe it, or have believed it all your life? What do you actually believe? If this podcast could do nothing more than ask you that question, if we could not give you answers but question your answers, that would be one of the best podcasts we have. So Michael, in closing, I ask you the question I ask everybody to close the show. When you look out your window at the world that you see, is this the world that you always dreamed of giving over to your kids?
No, it's not. And my mission is to help create a better one for my children.
So For women and men both who are listening, what's one thing they could start doing today and continue to do every single day? One small thing or large thing that next time you're on the podcast and I ask you this question and everybody was doing that, it would lean the world more to the place that would be something that you would be saying unequivocally, yes, I would love to give this world now to my kids.
That's beautiful. I would say that one thing that people can do straight away is begin to question everything they think, begin to question their beliefs, because unless we're fully conscious of what we think and what we believe, we shouldn't believe anything that we think.
Yeah.
And the other, and that's really about deep self-reflection,
Yeah.
self-questioning. And I think if we can all start doing that at a higher level from a deeper place, we will automatically and by default just create better versions of ourselves in every moment.
Fabulous. Love having you on, Michael. How can people get in touch with you? We're going to post your links and stuff like that. But why don't you just say, how's the best way for them to get in touch with you now?
Yeah, cool. For the men who are listening, so I have a private Facebook group called Forging Excalibur, Creating Knights from Men. And for anyone else, michaellauria.coaching.com.
Fabulous. I normally take a minute and just summarize, if I can do that for a minute with you.
Sure.
I really want to thank you for getting me upset. I normally don't get upset too easily, but I watched myself physically get upset, and in watching myself get physically upset, I just asked myself, why? Why, just because someone believes differently than me, do I get upset? That's not something I believe in. I believe that you have every right to believe the way you believe. And what you did is you helped give me insight as to why other people get upset that I can never understand why they get upset. And I appreciate that. And here's what I take from Forging Excalibur for me. What I saw happen today in this discussion, for me, I'm not going to speak for you, but for me, what I saw happen is that sword that's on fire behind you, the Excalibur, wasn't a weapon that I used outside of myself, but it was something that I literally turned inside myself. And I saw some of the pieces of things that I believed being sliced away. And I felt the pain of it, and that's why I got upset. I felt the need to defend my audience who might get upset. And yet I love when the sword of wisdom or the sword of anything comes to rattle the cage of who I am. And so for me, the Excalibur sword is a sword that plunges and cuts away at everything that no longer belongs. And what no longer belongs in me is that intolerance. And I want to thank you for pointing that out to me and to my audience, because so often people think I'm such a wise man. I often correct them and say, my mom always said I was a wise guy, which is different than a wise man. And I think I'm still a wise guy. And I like that image that you started it out, which here's the jester, which you are being kind, which is really the fool and the sage. What is the image of the archetype that you carry in the world around you? And when the Excalibur sword cuts away at that image, how do you find yourself?
So the archetypal energy that I carry most of the time is the magician.
Right.
Because the magician, and I'll just break this down into the 4 main archetypes, which is the
Okay,
king,
hold
warrior,
on.
magician, and lover.
That wasn't actually a physical question. That was a hypothetical question that
Oh, rhetorical.
a rhetorical question that I was asking the
My
audience
apologies.
to answer. No, I'm just trying to honor your time because we're past the time that we could go.
Oh, that's okay. I don't mind.
We could have spoken for a long, long time because I think we're really only at the surface of where we're going. But I would be interested, and you can write notes to this, and I'll get them out to the audience also of what your archetypes are and what's going on. But in honor of people's time and space, it was really
Understood.
it was really a question that I was lobbing up to people, because really at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what Michael thinks or what I think. It's helpful. It's enjoyable to have conversation. But the whole idea of this podcast is for you to be a fly on the wall so you get insights into what you actually think. And I'd like to invite you to do that. So, Michael, thank you again for being here. For those of you who come and hear all the podcasts of the Mosaic Podcast, I can't thank you enough for your time. I hope you will rate and review this. I hope you will give it 1 star, 2 stars, whatever stars you feel you like. If we've pissed you off, I'm really happy. If we've made you happy, I'm really happy. Because it's okay. Either way, they're all good. And I hope you'll join us next time when the Mosaic Podcast comes back on. Thank you so much again for your time and for being here. And Michael, thank you. I'm sorry I cut you off. I honor you and respect you, and I appreciate you.
Thank you. Likewise.
Okay.